Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today I'm bringing you a recap of the Ask Me Anything for X-Wing, and Max Brooks and Brooks Pfluger-Levitt have decided to give us a little preview. Now, forewarning, they did not talk very much about future releases, and that was, I would say, probably the majority of the questions. Hey, are you going to do this? Hey, are you going to do that? However, there were some hints, very strong hints, things that I would go so far as to call soft confirmation of a couple of things, and you can, based on facial expressions and things of that sort. So we're going to talk about all of that. I also want to thank the sponsor of this video, Luxury Playstyle, who makes some of the most amazing tokens you can find. They are absolutely fantastic. I urge you to check them out, luxuryplaystyle.com. You can save 15% if you use code Crabbok VIP. They've got some amazing X-Wing tokens, also Keyforge tokens, and I've even been using some of their tokens in my Legion games. So if you do pick some up, you use that code, you can save 15%. Let me know. If you do pick some up, let me know what you think of them as well, because I think they're absolutely fantastic, and I wouldn't be talking about them if I didn't love them. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and start talking about all of this Ask Me Anything. So one of the biggest things that was talked about is a lot of ability questions, things like pinpoint tractor array and timing of ability queues. All of that stuff is going to be addressed in basically a future FAQ that is going to be coming out before Worlds, and it will be in the form of a forum post, so you're going to get a lot of those answers in the near future. They didn't really go into rules very specifically in this AMA, other than just to say, stay tuned. So that is kind of a big thing. Another big question was the Nantex. A lot of people are talking about the Nantex. What are they going to do about it? They're keeping their eye on it, but they're not going to make any changes right now, right before Worlds. So that is not going to change right now. So a lot of stuff they're keeping their eye on. They're basically, it was a common phrase. A lot of things they're keeping their eye on. A lot of things that some people might think are overpowered or underpowered, or things that may have supposed to have been changed in points but weren't changed in points. They're really keeping their eye on a lot of that stuff. Games going to time, which is a common trend now. A lot more games are going to time. A lot of questions about gas clouds even, and they're keeping their eye on all of that stuff. So a lot of things I would say were kind of non-answers. Although the funny thing is they did mention keeping their eye on, and there was almost like a pun, because a lot of people have suggested have the gas clouds give you the ion effect, and they said with gas clouds they're keeping their eye on it. I don't know if that was meant to be a pun or not, but that was pretty funny. Speaking of gas clouds, they did confirm that there'll be a new gas cloud shapes in the obstacle pack when that comes out. So, we thought it was just going to be more of everything of the same, but I guess there's going to be new shapes, and that may actually mean that you can run, different shaped gas clouds and new combinations of obstacles as a result of that. So that's actually kind of interesting. I, for one, am a big fan of the gas clouds, because if I screw up, I can still shoot. So, I kind of like that. All right, so there were some other questions. Some people were asking if they can still make Legends, if they can still pull stuff from Legends and make Legends ships, or if some of the ships from Legends that are in the game are only in there because they were grandfathered in. And this actually is very similar to questions we've seen in other games, and that yes, the short answer is yes, they can, but the long answer is no, they're not going to. At least not for a while. And let me paraphrase, because there's certain things they have to stay very political about that I certainly don't. They're heavily influenced by what Lucasfilm wants to do. They kind of downplay it as it's more of a team thing, but let's face it just makes a whole lot of good sense for them to kind of focus on new stuff. If Mandalorian comes out and has new fighters, then there's going to be new fighters from the Mandalorian in X-Wing. If Episode 9 comes out and has new fighters, which we pretty much know it does and will, then that stuff is going to make its way into X-Wing. And they're not going to postpone something that's the new hotness for some old ship from Legends that may only hit 30 to 40% of the player base. So, and I'm just making those numbers up. I don't know if it's 30. I don't know what percentage of the player base wants what ship in particular. But the fact that the gunboat got made kind of does show that if demand is there enough, they can go ahead and do it. So there's a lot of different factors that will drive their ship making, and Legends is certainly on the table. But Lucasfilm also wants to emphasize a lot of the new stuff, and we're in a world and a landscape right now where there's a ton of new stuff coming out. So there's no shortage of new promotional hotness that they're going to have to acquiesce to. And that's fine. I think that's going to work for probably the largest portion of the player base. Now, when I do expect more Legends stuff to come out is when if we start to see a lull in new ships. In other words, maybe post Episode 9, maybe we get a couple year break for the next movie, and maybe some of the new shows that come out don't feature as many new ships. Maybe they're more ground-based, right? Mandalorian looks to be like it's more ground-based. Obi-Wan might be more ground-based. We may go a couple months without any new ships. That might be an opportunity for FFG to say, okay, now is a good opportunity for us to pull, this ship or that ship, out of Legends. So I think that's my prediction when stuff like that will come. It's there's a lot of factors, but I think the biggest one is Lucasfilm wanting to emphasize certain new products, and that certainly makes sense. Although that doesn't mean that they're going to do it too soon. Because like they did with The Force Awakens, but that is definitely a driving factor. So, hyperspace. And people were talking about hyperspace. Since we're getting so many more ships now released, what is going to be the future of the hyperspace format? They do want to certainly continue to use it, and it may get used in some different ways. So they talked about the possibility of phasing out certain ships. Or even certain pilots. So, like they said, for example, you might not see the X-Wing or the TIE Fighter phased out, especially when the game is called X-Wing, but you might see certain pilots phased out of hyperspace. Now, keep in mind, hyperspace is just one format. You'll always have extended and custom formats and stuff. But if hyperspace is going to be a more restrictive format, it will focus on generally the newer releases, the most recent wave, and they may just phase certain things out. Like this season, there's no Y-wings this season because Y-wings are, don't reflect. Maybe we're trying to go like no ships that have turrets, and we want to focus a season on all forward primary arcs. That is just me paraphrasing. But they did do an example of they could also restrict certain pilots out of hyperspace, so you might see Luke in an X-Wing, but maybe Biggs is off limits for this particular wave of hyperspace. You might see something like that in the future. There's a lot of design space that they can work with. So there were a lot of questions about points adjustments and like one of their goals. And, I don't want to go into too much of like developer behind the scenes stuff, but that was a lot of talk about that. So if you're interested in a lot of their motivations in the design process, I definitely encourage you to go back and watch this if you can. But an interesting thing is like they're not intending to take something that's like super top tier and nerf it down into oblivion. They want to take something that's like S tier and just nerf it down into like A tier. And so if you're not familiar with tiers, usually you have your A through F, A being good, F being bad, like school grades, and then something that is consistently always outperforming even the A lists, they sometimes call S tier or like super, and that's just like basically like A plus. So they want to bring maybe the stuff that everybody's running and just make it a regular, really good build and not necessarily the most OP build. So they're trying to do smaller incremental adjustments with points adjustments as opposed to just nerfing something into oblivion. That's kind of the mindset of a lot of that. Some people were asking about like Scum. Will they get so many ships that they lose their niche? And they had a partial answer to that. They're not really worried about it. And they kind of emphasized the fact that they have so many new tools available in the design space that they're not really worried about things like that happening. So I think there are going to be a lot more. Basically, it sounds like we're going to continue to get more new ships in the existing factions that are already bloated, including Scum. Their pilot packs were asked about. Will there be more pilot packs? And it was a maybe answer, and it boils down to if these pilot packs are successful, which of course at the low price point they're at, of course they're going to be successful. So to me, that's almost like a soft yes. Of course there will be more pilot packs. They will but they have to make sure, they basically, and they're not going to answer any of those like, hey, are you going to make X? They didn't give hard answers to any of that. Or virtually any of that. So we got some questions about huge ships, and that was always a nice one. So the huge ships, like one of the big things is there were no titles for the new factions, right? So like the CR90 had Rebel titles, but no Republic titles, etc. And the C-Rock has no Separatist titles, and they were talking about all of these things on the as far as it applies to all the huge ships going forward, and the fact that the huge ships can be used amongst multiple factions, and they kind of clarified that. They basically said with this first wave of huge ships, for all the things that are coming in the huge ship packs, as well as the conversion kit, the whole idea here was the focus was primarily to upgrade your 1.0 stuff with a minimal extra of, the other factions can use it. But it was really meant to upgrade what you already had. So if you already had a Scum ship, you're now getting a C-Rock that still works well with Scum. If you already had a Rebel huge ship, you're now getting something that works well with Rebel. And by the way, this other faction can use it too. And that's dual pronged because a big ship takes a long time to make, and they want more people to be able to use it. So if they're putting all this design space into a Rebel ship, it made more sense back when the game had only 2 factions. Now that there's 7, they want more people to be able to use it. They don't want to put that much effort into making a huge ship and only 15% of the player base can use it. So, by opening them up to more factions makes more sense. I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense to me. But also, there was a really good soft confirmation, almost a solid confirmation, and that was about the Separatists and the Republic. Hey, are they going to get their own huge ships? And will those huge ships? This was my question too, because I got a couple of mine answered. And will those ships also be have multiple cards for multiple factions as well? So if the Separatists get a huge ship, will that be used by somebody else? And so basically they said, they give a soft confirmation that yes, the Republic and the Separatists are getting huge ships. They didn't say yes, but they said, well, we can't talk about future products, but I like the Separatists and I like huge ships. He likes the Separatists and he likes huge ships, and I like the Republic and I like huge ships, and he likes the Republic and he likes huge ships. So, wink, wink. In other words, they're not clear to announce future product right now, but yes, they're getting huge ships. Is basically the takeaway from that. So that's actually really good news. Also, let me pause here and remind you guys about the giveaway. I'm giving away a $25 Amazon gift card. I'll be announcing the winner of that in a few more days, so there's still time left to enter. All you have to do is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. And for your comment, let me know your big takeaways from this Ask Me Anything. What huge ships really do you want to see for other factions? Now, a follow-up to that question is, will those other huge ships, have cards that make them usable by other factions as well? And it was kind of a mostly yes. And they said, look, it makes sense. It makes perfectly good sense for us to make a big ship that other factions can also use. But there was the caveat where it's like, but it has to make sense, so it'll be on a case-by-case basis. They want more people to have access to these huge ships. They want a big ship that they put all these design hours into to be desirable by a larger portion of the player base. So if it's an Imperial ship, they want First Order players to want it also, or Separatist players to want it also. However, the fact that they said it would have to be on a case-by-case basis makes me think that, at least in their heads right now, there is at least one huge ship that will not be usable by another faction. That is my takeaway. That's my speculation. It's not a confirmation. It could just be them covering themselves, future-proofing their remarks. But that sounds to me like they've got a plan for at least one, if not more, huge ships that are not cross-faction compatible. And yes, and a slight takeaway from that is I also expect there to be pilot packs or card packs that introduce new titles and stuff for the huge ships for their secondary factions and things like that. I could see that happening at another point, since they talked about how the conversion kit was really primarily focused on this niche. I could see there being a card pack that addresses the other niche. So that's a pretty interesting thing. So more on some new products. We're kind of rounding down here because there was a lot talked about, but I'm focusing on, I think, the things that have takeaways. Another one of my questions, which was pretty cool, I was talking about the attack shuttle and how that did not come with the Ghost, but the Sheathipede did, and the Sheathipede fits in there pretty good, but the attack shuttle doesn't. Are they considering redesigning the attack shuttle? Because I don't have to ask if they were going to make an attack shuttle, because I think the plan was all along re-release everything under 2.0. So that tells me an attack shuttle's coming. Are you going to redesign it so that it fits in there? And they look like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. Usually when somebody says that sounds cool, that sounds like that's like a yes, but I'm not cleared to say yes. So it sounds to me like, and this was a kind of a softball question, I think, because I think we all kind of expected an attack shuttle to be redesigned somehow. How exactly they're going to do it really is the mystery. Are they going to put like 3 or 4 hinges in there and make the wings completely fold up, or will they be maybe replaceable wings, like they just slide off and slide on? I think they're going to go for it. I think they're going to go and run the risk and really make an attack shuttle that completely folds up. That's what I think they're going to do. Might even be magnetized, which would be a tall order. It would be a really tall order. And it'd be awesome if you can make it happen. I think it'd be super awesome. All right. So I was asked, will some ships be able to jump into new factions? So we see, this ship in a different faction or something like that. And they said that that's a possibility, and they might do it a little bit, but not too much. The people asked about Star Wars Rebels and the crew, the Ghost crew. Would they potentially show up in more ships? Because a lot of them piloted multiple different ships, like Hera in a B-Wing, for example. And they said they'd love to do that. However, there were so many ships that they piloted, because that show focused on them a lot, that they probably wouldn't be able to do every single instance of every single person and every single ship that they ever flew. Because you have Hera in just about every single possible ship. And, so they'd like to do some of that, but they probably won't be able to do 100% of it all. They did make some jokes about Hera in the B-Wing, though, so I would look for that. I think that's a possibility at some point, and they could do some potentially cool things. They'd probably have to find a way to make that whole B-Wing super one-shot cannon thing work. Ship-specific upgrades. They were talked about, like maybe a restrictive title like Rogue Leader or something like that for an X-Wing. Could they do more ship-specific upgrades? And they kind of toyed around with it. This doesn't sound like this is something that's in the works right now, but it's something that's maybe at least in the design space. And then, they kind of talked about some ways that they could make things like that work, where it wouldn't, might work for one pilot but not for another. Like, because of the restrictive slots they have on those type of upgrades, they could say pilot with initiative 5 or higher. Maybe Luke could use something that another pilot couldn't use or something like that. So, or they could put specific pilot names and restrict it to like Luke or Wedge only, or something like that is also in the design space that they could potentially do. And a really, really interesting one, and I'm closing with this one, is they asked about Heroes of the Aturi cluster for X-Wing, and now that's been something that I think a lot of people have wanted to see officially get made for a long time. But yeah, and they said, oh well, I really love that sort of thing. It was big, one of those wink moments, and it really made me think that they're actually doing it. So my takeaway from there is something like Heroes of the Aturi cluster is officially coming for X-Wing. That's my takeaway. That was almost soft confirmation that they're doing something like that. And it may be more along the lines of how Armada has those campaign packs. We may have something. I expect it'll be easier for them to do a campaign system for X-Wing than a full AI system. However, it's already been done, right? It's already been done. So maybe all they had to do is like license it or contract the folks that made Heroes of the Aturi cluster. I mean, that's entirely possible. Or maybe they just kind of borrowed some inspiration from that and came up with their own thing. But I think it's a really cool question, and their answer was very much like, well, I love stuff like that, so we'll have to see. It was like, all right, sounds like something like that's coming. Hey, and that's really cool. I actually hope it's campaign-based, and maybe even with like solo AI or co-op. I think that would be really cool. And, especially if it's official, so you don't have to... I don't know. I mean, like, Heroes of the Aturi cluster is so popular already that, like, everybody kind of knows about it, or at least a lot of people know about it. I have not actually played it, but I would love to see them really, produce a kit for that. Because I've seen some people really, have a high-end printer and print out a really high-end Heroes of the Aturi cluster set of, like, cardboard and cards and all of the stuff you need to make that work. I'd love to see FFG produce a really high-quality set like that, too. I think that'd be really cool. All right, guys, well, that's all I got for you today. I want to thank my patrons on Patreon. You guys are amazing. And also want to thank Luxury Playstyle. All right, that's all I've got. And I'm about to sneeze. So I'm going to sign off. All right, almost made it. All right, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, have a great day.